करू चालतो चालू करतो. ओके. Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to this wonderful channel. Today we are going to go into the last chapter of Unit 9. And today's topic, there are several topics in it. The first topic today we are going to study is about Environment Protection Act 1986. So we have been studying about people, environment, development, and how development and how the people have a adverse effect upon the climate and upon the surroundings and upon the environment. So today we are going to see as to what the government of India as well as the United Nations organization has done to protect the environment. So the first thing that we are going to study today is Environment Protection Act of 1986. Now, this act was enacted in 1986 with the objective of providing the protection and improvement of the environment. This particular law, basically deals with India. This was a law this act was passed in 1986 by the Indian government. India's original constitution did not contain any provisions for the protection of the natural environment. So the constitution that we had, the original constitution, did not have any provisions to protect the natural environment. However, the fundamental duties which were added by the 42nd Amendment to the Constitution prescribe the protection of the environment, including forest, lakes, rivers, and wildlife as a duty of the citizens of the country. Then we see the fundamental duties which were basically added in the 42nd Amendment of the Constitution to the Constitution. It added new rules or new fundamental duties of citizens towards the nations to protect the environment, which includes forests, lake, rivers, as well as wildlife, and this is supposed to be the duty of the citizens of the entire country. This amendment also added new directive principles of state policy, one of which was Article 48A, which directed the state to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard forests and wildlife. So Article 48A, under the directive principles of the state policy, it added and it says that the state is to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard forests as well as the wildlife. Then we move on to the second one. In 1986, the Environmental Protection Act was passed by the Parliament in the wake of the Bhopal Gas Tragedy, which occurred on 2nd December 1984. We all are aware of the Bhopal Gas Tragedy, the poisonous gas that was released in Bhopal, which killed thousands and thousands of people. We are all aware of it. So in 1986, this Environmental Protection Act was passed by the Parliament. Then the roots of the enactment of the Environmental Protection Act lies in the United Nations Conference on Human Environment held at Stockholm in June 1972. Which is also called as the Stockholm Conference, in which India participated to take appropriate steps for the improvement of the human environment. Now, the roots or the origin of this Environmental Protection Act lies with the United Nations Conference on Human Environment, which was held in June 1972. And according to this particular conference of the United Nations, it was decided that all the member countries, those who have participated into it, would take appropriate measures, would take appropriate steps to improve the human environment within their own countries. Then what are the objectives of the Environmental Protection Act? The first one is implementing the decisions made by the United Nations Conference on Human Environment held in Stockholm. So this whatever decisions were given by, or whatever decisions the United Nations Conference on Human Environment had arrived, those decisions were to be implemented in India as well through this Environmental Protection Act. Then creation of a government authority to regulate industry that can issue direct orders, including closure orders. So the government would have sufficient authority to regulate all the different industries within India, and they also had the right to close certain companies which were causing a lot of pollution. Then we have coordinating activities of different agencies that are operating under the existing laws. So India already had certain agencies which were basically looking after the environment. So coordination between them was also essential. Enacting regular laws for the protection of the environment, imposing punishment and penalties on those who endanger the environment, safety and health. So the government also, according to the Environment Protection Act, received certain powers and laws. It could make certain laws, and it had some authority to impose punishment as well as fines and penalties to those who are endangering the environment, the safety and health of the people, and who are causing a lot of pollution. For each failure or contravention, the punishment includes a prison term of up to 5 years or a fine up to rupees 1 lakh or both. This can also be extended up to 7 years in cases. So with this EPA, the government got authority, the government got power to impose sanctions, to impose fines and penalties, as well as imprisonment on people who were causing problems for the environment. Engaging in a sustainable development of the environment, then attaining protection of the right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution. Then what are the different constitutional provisions that are received under the EPA, Environmental Protection Act? The EPA Act was enacted under Article 253 of the Indian Constitution, which provides for the enactment of legislation for giving effect to international agreements. Article 48A gives of the Constitution specifies that the state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forest and wildlife of the country. So Article 48 of the Constitution then specifically mentioned to protect and to improve the environment, as well as to safeguard the forest and the jungles, or what we call as the wildlife of the country. Article 51A further provides that every citizen shall protect the environment. So under Article 51A, it becomes the bounden duty of every citizen of India to protect the environment. The Act is applicable to the whole of India, including the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So this particular Act, EPA, is applicable to the entire country of India. Then National Action Plan on Climate Change. The National Action Plan on Climate Change, NAPCC, was launched in 2008 by the Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change. It aims at creating awareness among the representatives of the people, different agencies of the government, scientists, industries, and communities on the threat posed by climate change and the steps to counter it. Now, what is National Action Plan on Climate Change? We all have studied climate change, and we know how climate change is there and how and what are the different adverse effects of climate change. So here we see the what is the purpose, or what is the aim and objective of this National Action Plan on Climate Change, which was formed in 2008. It is meant to create awareness among all the representatives of the people, also the agencies, government, scientists, industries, as well as the different communities of India on the threat posed by the climate change and the steps to counter it. What are the different kinds of threats that are posed by climate change, and how climate change is not good for the world, not good for our country, and what are the different steps we are going to undertake and the world is going to undertake to counter climate change. There are 8 national missions forming the core of the National Action Plan on Climate Change, NAPCC, which represent multi-pronged, long-term and integrated strategies for achieving key goals in climate change. Now, climate change cannot happen within one day or it cannot happen in a short period of time. A certain particular strategy, a certain planning has to be done on a long-term basis to bring this climate change under control. So this NAPCC, it represents multi-pronged and long-term and integrated strategies for achieving the key goals of climate change. So this NAPCC, it represents multiple. Then it also invites international cooperation for research and development, sharing and transfer of data and technologies enabled by sufficient funding and backed up by global IPR regime under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So it also invites international cooperation. It calls for international cooperation for research development, for sharing and transferring of data, as well as technologies which are related to climate change. The NAPCC addresses the country's critical and urgent needs by directionally shifting the development path and enhancing the current and planned programs and technologies. It identifies measures that promote our development goals and co-benefits by addressing climate change also. Then what are the different achievements of NAPCC? The Worldwide Fund for Nature, India, WWF, feels that the National Action Plan is fairly comprehensive and has cross-sectoral links through the 8 national level missions. The focal point is India's impetus on following on a low carbon energy path without impeding economic growth and quality of life of the people. Now, what are the reactions of this NAPCC towards NAPCC is that the focal point is India's impetus on following on a low carbon energy path. That means carbon emissions have to be low. That means we are going to reduce on using hydrocarbons for generating energy. And at the same time, we are also not going to sacrifice our economic growth and the quality of the life of people. NAPCC brings a balanced perspective on mitigation and adaptation through some new dimensions like creation of new national mission on strategic knowledge for climate change, as this would ensure exchange of knowledge and informed research in India. So what India intends to do is to develop strategic knowledge for climate change, which would also be used to exchange this particular knowledge with other countries also, because as we know that climate change is not related to a particular country or to a particular region. It is basically the affair of the entire world, and unless and until the entire world comes together, we will not be able to overcome the climate change problems. Then the next topic that we have is Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer is an important multilateral agreement regulating the production, consumption, and emissions of ozone depletion substances, ODSS. So what is this Montreal Protocol? It is this particular protocol which studies or which regulates which regulates or which puts a regulation on substances that deplete the ozone layer. We had seen what is the ozone layer and what are the effects of the ozone layer getting depleted because the harmful ultraviolet rays of the sun, they directly reach the earth. It causes global warming, as well as a lot of other diseases are caused because of the depletion of ozone layer. It is an important part of international environmental conventions and protocols. So Montreal Protocol is also a very, very important part of international environmental convention and protocols. Montreal Protocol shares some details of the ozone layer, important points on the Montreal Protocol, successes associated with the Montreal Protocol, and association of India with the Montreal Protocol. Montreal Protocol is related to the regulation of ozone depleting substances. It was signed in 1987, came into force in 1989. By the late 1970s, scientists were able to prove that chemical substances that were used in air conditioners, refrigerators, and aerosol cans were causing damage to the ozone layer. Now, by late 1970s, it was discovered by the scientists that there were certain, and it was also proved by the scientists that certain chemical substances that were used in the air, which were basically used in air conditioners, refrigerators, and aerosol cans, were really causing great damage to the ozone layer. In 1985, a huge hole was discovered in the ozone layer over Antarctica. This hole allowed hazardous levels of ultraviolet radiation to reach the Earth's surface. So in 1985, it was discovered that a huge hole has been created in the ozone layer over Antarctica, and because of which the hazardous ultraviolet rays and radiations are able to reach the Earth's surface. Now, what is the ozone layer? It is a layer in the Earth's stratosphere which contains high levels of ozone. This layer protects the Earth from sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation. It absorbs 97 to 99% of the ultraviolet radiation from the sun. We all know that ozone layer is like a blanket which protects the Earth, which protects the atmosphere. Ozone layer is situated in the Earth's stratosphere, and it contains high levels of ozone. Now, this layer, ozone layer, is this ozone layer is able to protect the Earth and the inhabitants of the Earth from the harmful ultraviolet radiation, because it absorbs 97 to 99% of the ultraviolet radiation which comes from the sun. In the absence of the ozone layer, millions of people would be affected by skin diseases, including cancer and weakened immune systems. Now we know that what are the harmful impact of the ultraviolet radiation from the sun. If these rays come directly on the Earth, millions of people would get impacted or will get affected by skin diseases, including cancer, and their immune system will also become very, very weak. Ultraviolet radiation would also affect the environment adversely, leading to decreased productivity. Not only that, but this ultraviolet radiation will also affect the entire environment and will adversely bring about a decrease in the productivity. The fauna of the Earth is also adversely affected by ozone layer depletion. Fauna means animals. Animals of the Earth will also be adversely affected by the ozone layer depletion. Ozone layer depletion, this refers to the thinning of the protective ozone layer in the atmosphere. This happens when certain chemicals come into contact with the ozone and destroy it. we are referring to what does ozone layer depletion means. It becomes a thinning of the protective ozone layer in the atmosphere. When certain chemicals come into contact with this ozone, it gets destroyed. Chemical compounds that cause ozone layer depletion are called ozone depleting substances, ODSS. Now, example of ozone depleting substances are chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, HCFCs, carbon tetrachloride, methyl chloroform, hydrobromofluorocarbons, halogens, etc. So these are all the chemicals which are responsible for the ozone layer depletion. Chlorofluorocarbons are the most abundant ozone layer depleting substances. The indiscriminate use of these chemicals causes ozone layer depletion. These ozone depleting substances are also powerful greenhouse gases and have a lifelong as well. There are a few natural causes which cause ozone depletion, such as volcanic eruptions, sunspots, stratospheric winds. However, these do not cause more than 1-2% of the ozone depletion. So we see that there are natural causes also, or there are natural occurrences also which deplete the ozone layer, but these are just 1-2% of the total impact that is caused. So this particular Montreal Protocol basically deals with the substances which deplete the ozone layer, and how countries of the world can work together to see that to control this ozone layer depletion. Then what are the important points of Montreal Protocol? It faces down the use of ODSS in a stepwise time-bound manner. So it faces down the use of ODSS in a stepwise time-bound manner. So it is not saying that immediately you just shut down all the things which are causing this ozone layer depletion, but it gives step-by-step time-bound in a time-bound manner. It asks the nations of the world to reduce the gases, or to reduce the use of chemicals which are depleting the ozone layer. It gives different timetables for developing and developed countries. All member parties have specific responsibilities related to the phasing out of various groups of ozone depleting substances, controlling ODS trade, reporting of data annually, controlling export and imports of ozone depletion substances, etc. Developing and developed countries have equal but differentiated responsibilities. However, both groups of nations have time-bound, binding, and measurable commitments under the protocol, making it effective. Now, why Montreal Protocol is very, very effective? Because it gives both the developed and the developing countries certain responsibilities, equal responsibilities. It gives targets of reduction of these chemicals which are responsible for the ozone layer depletion, and it also gives targets which are time bound, which are also binding upon the countries, and commitments of the different countries towards reduction of using these particular chemicals which are depleting the ozone layer. Under the protocol, there is a provision for it to be amended and adjusted according to the new scientific, economic, and technological advancements made. The protocol has undergone 9 amendments or revisions. So this Montreal Protocol has undergone 9 revisions or amendments. The governance body for the protocol is the meeting of the parties. Technical support is given by the open-ended working group. Both meet once every year. The parties are aided by the Ozone Secretariat, which is based at the headquarters of the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, at Nairobi. It has been ratified by 197 parties, 196 member states of the United Nations plus the European Union, making it the first United Nations treaty to be ratified by every country in the world. So all the countries of the United Nations, along with the European Union, have ratified this particular treaty. This is the biggest treaty. And we see that because it has created such great awareness in the minds of the people of the world. Then we move on to the next topic, that is the Rio Summit. United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED. The full form of UNCED is United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, also known as Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, or it is also called as the Rio Summit, Rio Conference, and it is also called as the Earth Summit, was a major United Nations conference held in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil from 3rd to 14th of June 1992. 172 governments participated, with 116 sending their heads of state or government. So the Rio Summit is also again a very useful summit or a very powerful summit, because all the countries, or 172 countries of the world, had directly participated in this particular Rio Summit for environment and development of the world. The Rio Summit 1992 is also called as the Earth Summit. This summit led to the development of the following documents: the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. This particular Rio Summit of 1992, it gave birth to Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, Agenda 2021 Forest Principles. The first document, called Rio Declaration, in short, contained 27 principles that were supposed to guide countries in future sustainable development. Agenda 21 is an action plan concerning sustainable development, but it is non-binding. That means it does not legally force the nations of the world to do it. The forest principles are formally called non-legally binding authoritative statements of principles for a global consensus on the management, conservation, and sustainable development of all types of forest. So what is this forest principle? It is basically a non-binding authoritative statement to conserve and sustainably develop all kinds of forest. It makes many recommendations for conservation and sustainable development, forestry, and is non-binding. So it makes many recommendations for what? For the conservation and the sustainable development of forests, and is also non-binding. That means it does not force its laws and actions upon the countries of the world. Then we have Rio plus 20. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, hosted the Earth Summit in 1992. As a result, it is known as Rio Summit. Its more recent Rio Summit was known as Rio plus 20, since there were two summits 20 years apart in 1992 and 2012. So this Rio plus 20 summit was held in 2012. It was meant to be a high-level meeting attended by heads of state and government as well as other delegates, with the goal of producing a targeted political statement that would help define international environmental policy. Now, Rio 20 plus 20, the main thing is that they want to develop a international environmental policy. Rio plus 20 is regarded as a crucial opportunity for the international community to reaffirm its commitment to sustainable development and explore creative models to inspire global action on sustainability. So, the officials' discussion centered on two major topics: how to build a green economy for long term development and lifting people out of poverty. So, there are two basic goals or two basic topics to how they are going to build a green economy for a longer term development, and how people would be lifted out up from the poverty line, how the economic status of the developing world or underdeveloped world would be increased, and how to improve international cooperation for long-term development. So for environment, for climate change, or for anything that is related to pollution or to climate change or global warming, all the countries of the world are responsible. All the countries of the world, unless and until they join hands together, nothing can be done as far as global warming and climate change is concerned. If all the countries of the world, they come together, and if they take appropriate measures, then only some kind of control on global warming and some kind of climate control can be achieved, because it is not the duty, or it is not in the capacity of one country or two countries to do the things to stop this particular global warming and climate change. More than $530 billion was pledged at Rio plus 20 to build a sustainable future. It represented a significant step forward in achieving the future we desire. So a huge amount of money, that is $513 billion, was also pledged at this Rio plus 20 conference to build a sustainable future. Now, what are the objectives and themes of Rio plus 20? The UNCSD 2012 has the following objectives: renewing political support for sustainable development. We all have studied the sustainable development, and we have seen the importance of sustainable development. So, renewing political support by all the countries for this particular sustainable development is one of the objectives of Rio plus 20. Evaluating the results of the execution of the decisions reached at the Rio conference and the gaps that remain to be filled, and tackling fresh and developing problems, tackling the new emerging problems and the problems that are getting developed. And the themes of this UN CSD 2012 include green economy in relation to eradicating poverty and promoting sustainability. Then an institutional framework for sustainable development. They also want to develop an institutional framework for sustainable development. Now, what is Rio plus 20 and green economy? The theme of green economy has received a lot of attention in the run-up to Rio plus 20. Developing countries believe that the Rio principles, along with its three pillars of economic, social, and environmental development, must continue to define the global development path. Now, the developing countries, what is their main agenda? That the basic three pillars of global development, that is the economic, social, and environmental development, they must continue so that to define the global development path. It is not that the global development path should leave the social as well as the environmental development. According to their understanding, the green economy is subsumed within this broader framework, and action on green growth can only be achieved if developing countries are provided with an enabling mechanism that includes finance, technology, and capacity building assistance. Now, according to the understanding of these developing countries, what do they understand, or what is their demand? That green growth can only be achieved if the developed countries of the world, they provide the mechanisms that are which includes money, that is economy, technology, and capacity building assistance to the developing countries. They also believe that green economy template will be successful only if it improves their ability to address poverty eradication, provides adequate policy space for national circumstances and priorities, and ensures that structural changes as a result of it do not lead to green protectionism and conditionality. Now, if the developing countries of the world, they believe that when is green economy possible, or when can green economy be successful? Only when the developed countries will address towards the poverty eradication of these developing countries. They would give them with money and technology, so to overcome the different traditional methods of energy development. India believes that any understanding of the green economy must include the principles of equality and shared but differentiated responsibilities. It also sees Rio Plus 20 as an opportunity to refocus the global development agenda on sustainable development. Then the next one we have is Convention on Biological Diversity, or biodiversity. The United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, UNCBD, informally known as Biodiversity Convention, is a United Nations treaty that is responsible for the conservation of biological diversity around the world. Now, what is this convention? This basic convention is to preserve the biological diversity of the world, or to conserve the biological diversity of the world. It is also a treaty under the United Nations organization. Now, what is biodiversity? Biodiversity means the variability among living organisms from all sources and the ecological complexes of which they are part, and includes diversity within species or between species of the ecosystem. Then biological resources. The biological resources means plants, animals, and microorganisms, or parts thereof, their genetic material and byproducts, excluding value-added products with actual or potential use of value, but does not include human genetic material, or does not include human genetic material. So this is just good for information. What is biodiversity and what is biological resources? Then the Convention on Biological Diversity. Biodiversity conservation is a collective responsibility of all nations. So biodiversity conservation, or to preserve the biodiversity, is the collective responsibility of all the nations together. Convention on Biological Diversity is a step towards conserving biological diversity or biodiversity with the involvement of the entire world. So this particular Convention on Biological Diversity is a step towards conserving the biological or the biodiversity with the involvement of the entire world. The Convention on Biological Diversity, a multilateral treaty, was opened for signature at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 and entered into effect in 1993. It has two supplementary agreements, the Cartagena Protocol and Nagoya Protocol. The CBD Secretariat is based in Montreal, that is in Canada. It is a key document regarding sustainable development. It comes under the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP. This convention called upon all nations to take appropriate measures for the conservation of biodiversity and sustainable utilization of its benefits. Now, this particular convention calls upon the nations to take appropriate measures for conservation of biodiversity. It challenges the countries of the world, all the countries of the world, to protect and to conserve their different kinds of biodiversity and sustainably use this biodiversity for its benefits. The convention has three main goals: conservation of biological diversity or biodiversity, to protect or to conserve the biological diversity, sustainable use of its components, sustainable use or a proper use, wisely use the components, and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from genetic resources. The convention is legally binding. Countries that joins it, parties are obliged to implement its provision. So this particular convention, the Convention on Biodiversity, is legally binding. That means all the countries, any country which is a member to this convention or who has signed this particular document, have to obey the terms and conditions of this particular treaty. 195 UN states and the European Union are parties of this convention. All UN member states, with the exception of the United States, have ratified the treaty. So all countries of the United Nations have ratified this treaty except for the United States of America. International Biological Diversity Day is observed on 22nd May. So 22nd May is observed as the International Biological Diversity Day. India enacted Biological Diversity Act in 2002 for giving effect to the provisions of the CBD. Then we move on to the next one, that is the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was adopted on 11th of December 1997. Owing to the complex ratification process, it entered into force on 16th of February 2005. Currently, there are 192 parties to the Kyoto Protocol. So, Kyoto Protocol is also a very huge gathering. It is done under the United Nations framework of climate change, and almost all countries of the world are partakers of this Kyoto Protocol. In short, the Kyoto Protocol operationalizes the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change by committing industrialized countries and economies in transition to limit and reduce greenhouse gases GHG emissions in accordance with agreed individual targets. So the United Nations under this Kyoto Protocol has given certain targets for different countries for the emission of greenhouse gases. This particular Kyoto Protocol wants the United Nations framework on Convention on Climate Change wants the reduction of greenhouse gases emission. The convention itself only asks those countries to adopt policies and measures on mitigations and to report periodically. The Kyoto Protocol is based on the principles and provisions of the convention and follows its annex-based structure. It only binds developed countries and places a heavier burden on them under the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities, because it recognizes that they are largely responsible for the current high levels of greenhouse gases emission in the atmosphere. Now we see that it is who is the largest producer of this greenhouse gases. It is the developed countries, because they are highly industrialized countries, and because of that they emit high levels of greenhouse gases. And hence the Kyoto Protocol, even though got all the countries of the world as its members. It requests the developed countries of the world or the industrialized countries of the world to pay more money for as contribution for the for greenhouse gas emissions. In its Annex B, the Kyoto Protocol sets binding emission reduction targets for 37 industrialized countries and economies in transition and the European Union. Overall, these targets add up to an average 5% emission reduction compared to 1990 levels over a 5 period, 2008 to 2012. This is the first commitment period. So what does this Kyoto Protocol say, or what are the targets, or what are the aims and objectives? They say that they want reduction from of greenhouse gas emissions to be cut down by 5% by these 37 industrialized countries and economies. Then we have got this Doha amendment to the Kyoto Protocol. Doha, Qatar on 8 December 2012, the Doha amendment to the Kyoto Protocol was adopted for a second commitment period starting from 2013 and lasting until 2020. So this was a 7 years period which was promulgated under the Doha amendment to the Kyoto Protocol. As of 28 October 2020, 147 parties deposited the instrument of acceptance. Therefore, the threshold of 144 instruments of acceptance for entry into force of the Doha Amendment was achieved. The amendment entered into force on 31st December 2020. Now, what is this Doha Amendment? It includes new commitments for Annex 1 parties to the Kyoto Protocol who agree to take on commitments in a second commitment period from 1st of January 2013 to 31st of December 2020. So there were new commitments that were given to these countries with a period from the period of 1st January 2013 to 31st December 2020, that is a period of 7 years. A revised list of greenhouse gases to be reported on by parties in the second commitment period, and amendments to several articles of the Kyoto Protocol which specifically reference issues pertaining to the first commitment period and which needed to be updated for the second commitment period. Then we have got the Paris Agreement. The next topic is the Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is an international agreement to combat climate change. Just as we have this Kyoto Protocol and Doha Agreement for greenhouse emission gases, Paris Agreement is basically an international agreement to fight the climate change. From 30th November to 11th December 2015, the governments of 195 nations gathered in Paris, France, and discussed a possible new global agreement on climate change aimed at reducing global greenhouse emissions and thus reduce the threat of dangerous climate change. So what is this Paris Agreement all about? It is also an agreement on climate change. It also aims to reduce the global greenhouse gas emissions, which is causing the dangerous climate change. The 32-page Paris Agreement with 29 articles is widely recognized as a historic deal to stop global warming. Now, what are the aims and objectives of the Paris Agreement? As countries around the world recognize that climate change is a reality, they came together to sign the historic deal to combat climate change. The Paris Agreement, the aims of the Paris Agreement as are below: keep the global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. So to limit the global rise in temperature, to be below 2 degrees Celsius, pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Then strengthen the ability of countries to deal with the impacts of climate change, to help the other countries to deal with the impact of the climate change. Then we've got the last topic in this, that is International Solar Alliance. Its basic motive is to facilitate energy access, ensure energy security, and drive energy transition in its member countries. Now, what is this International Solar Alliance, ISA? What is the basic aim and objective? It is to facilitate, it is to help to energy access, ensure energy security, and drive energy transition in its member countries. It uses more of the solar, it envisages to use more of solar energy because it is a clean form of energy other than using hydrocarbons or the traditional ways to get energy. The ISA was conceived as a joint effort by India and France to mobilize efforts against climate change through development of solar energy solutions. Now, this idea, International Solar Alliance, came through India and France, so that to fight against climate change through the deployment of solar energy solution. Instead of using other means of deriving energy, they want to use the solar energy because it is infinite source of energy. It is a regular source of energy. It is available all over the world, and at the same time, it is a clean source of energy which does not cause any climate change, which does not cause any pollution or damage to the environment. The International Solar Alliance, ISA, is an action-oriented, member-driven collaborative platform for increased development of solar energy technologies. So through this International Solar Alliance, they are planning they are trying to deploy and to do a lot of research and development on the solar energy technologies. So what is the vision? Let us together make the sun brighter. So this is a vision. Let us together make the sun brighter. What is the mission? Every home, no matter how far away, will have a light at home. So this is a very good mission, since most of the countries of the world do not have electricity, do not have lights. The mission of this particular International Solar Alliance is to have light in every home. Then the headquarters are in India, with its interim secretariat being set up in Gurgaon. Then the member nations, a total of 106 countries have signed the ISA Framework Agreement. Out of 106 nations, 86 have signed and ratified the ISA Framework Agreement. All member states of the United Nations are eligible to join the eligible to join the ISA. Then what are the objectives of ISA? Objectives of International Solar Alliance. The International Solar Alliance seek to develop and deploy cost-effective and transformational solar energy solutions. So we see that what is the objective of ISA? They want to develop and deploy cost-effective. That means cheap kind of material which will be able to from where you can derive solar energy. To help member countries develop low carbon growth trajectories with particular focus on delivering impact in countries characterized as least developed countries and small island developing states. Then the 4 priority areas of the program. These priority areas are basically intended to create favorable environment for solar energy investment to take root in the country. So they want, according to ISA, they want this program to be favorable in all the different countries of the world. They want energy investments to take root in their respective countries. Then analytics and advocacy. Then we have capacity building programs. Then programmatic supports, readiness and enabling activities. So these are all the different ways in which they want to develop and use the solar systems for deriving energy, which is cheap, which is clean, and which is infinite source of energy. So with this, we finish with our last topic of people development and environment, that is unit 9 for NetSet exams. Any questions you can ask online, and I will always answer your questions. And all the best for your exams. Thank you so much and have a good day. If you like this program, you can give it a like, you can subscribe it, you can also share it so that others will also be benefited. Thank you so much and have a good day.